Welcome back, guys. It's Colin with the Sun Pirates TCG, joined today by my good friend Arvind,
Hello.
regular on the channel here. Yep. And today, as you can see, we are back with our next installment of the It Connects podcast, episode 10 or 11. I don't know. It's been quite a while since my last podcast episode. Quite frankly, we were still a One Piece channel when we had our last podcast. Quite a few things have changed. It's not that we've necessarily quit One Piece. It's just been on the back burner for quite a bit since Arver and I have been pretty heavily focused on on Gundam. Bit of a Freudian slip there. I'm trying to get more into Riftbound. But don't worry. I think most of you here are for Gundam anyway, so there'll definitely be more Gundam to go over and to talk about. As of right now, we actually have some really cool news that we want to share and discuss. So, on the Japanese side of things, on their Japanese Twitter account, I guess at this point, a couple days ago when I'm putting this up, they just announced that for the Japan finals, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like the equivalent of their nationals event, right?
Yep.
They will be implementing a new structure where it will be a best-of-3 format in Gundam with a 60-minute timer, 10 minutes of overtime, so instead of the normal 5 minutes, and a 10-card sideboard that you can utilize in between games. So, pretty big change. It's something that I've personally wanted for quite a while. I haven't really been very vocal about this kind of thing on my channel before, but it's something I'm very excited about. The funny thing, actually, Arver and I are basically re-recording this podcast episode because a few days ago we were having a discussion on what we would have wanted to see in the Gundam card game, and a best-of-3 with sideboard idea was something we threw around quite a bit. And then, literally, within 48 hours later, they came out with the news. Again, this is, if I remember correctly, this is specifically for Japanese nationals. There's been no announcement yet for the North American nationals.
It seems to be
I don't know,
a
what do you
trial
think?
program that they're throwing out.
Do you think it'll be implemented for NA? I don't think so. It doesn't sound like it will be.
I think if they were going to implement it for our nationals, they would have already announced it within the time period we've had since that announcement.
Yeah, I feel the same, yeah. But at any rate, that's where the discussion is going to be about today, is is it a good idea to have best-of-3 with sideboard, just going over the pros and cons, as well as, I guess, separately talking about having a sideboard, the pros and cons of that, because I know there's a group of people out there that might enjoy a best-of-3 format, but not necessarily want sideboard as its own component. Now, granted, this isn't the first time we've had a best-of-3 format in a Bandai game before. There's been precedents before. Digimon does a best-of-3 without a sideboard. Arvin, you know this better than I do. There was a point, right, where Digimon did have a sideboard, or it was like an experimental thing, right?
Yes, it was. There's two separate trial rules, I believe. One for a DigiFest event that happened in Miami, and then one that happened at the local level. I believe those are two separate sideboarding rules. Maybe there were different sideboards. It's been a long time, but they did try it and eventually decided to not go with sideboard in the game.
Yeah, was that like an executive decision that they opted not to go with sideboards, or is that based on player feedback or a mix of that? I guess what's the context around that, if you know? I don't know.
I'm not so sure. I don't know. I think I always hear players ask for sideboards now, but I'm wondering if that was different back then. I can't remember exactly. I liked it back then because it definitely let you switch up your strategies. I personally played a lot of Lilithmon back then, so I had a plethora of purple cards to side in and out for,
Nice, yeah.
for the matchups.
And then I guess there are a couple other Bandai games that have had a best-of-3 with sideboard. I think at a point, I don't know if this is still true for them today, but Dragon Ball Masters had a best-of-3 format with a sideboard. I very explicitly remember playing that kind of format years ago. Again, I don't know if that's what they still do nowadays. And Battle Spirit Saga, granted that game is no longer alive, but that was also a best-of-3 format with a 10-card sideboard. So just like what we are hopefully going to experience now. And yeah. So, and obviously just other TCGs with a best of three with sideboard, like Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, and then on the other end there's like Pokemon that is a best of three without a sideboard. So quite a bit of precedence there, both within and outside of Bandai's sphere, so to speak. But so as I was saying, for today's discussion, we're just going to talk about like what the pros and cons are for having a best of three format. What are the arguments for? What are the arguments against it? Because I know there's been a bit of back and forth, at least from some of the comments I've been seeing online in response to this, both on the western side and eastern side. But yeah, I think generally, and like, I don't know, what's your experience, Arvin? Because for me, from what I've been seeing, most of what I've been seeing is pretty positive as far as the reactions to this.
I think it could be a positive change. A lot of cards read like they would fit well in a sideboard, and I feels like I want to put so many cards in my deck whenever I'm deck building. You have so many choices for units to pair with your pilots. Sometimes you even want to switch pilots out depending on the types of decks you feel like you'd be playing. I know in the past you've enjoyed your CPU, organic CPU
Biological
engine.
CPU.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was a pretty cool package in blue white. So I guess let's start with talking about just best of three by itself before the sideboards. So what are some of the pros for best of three specifically? Well, the biggest thing that most people point to is the mitigation of variance,
Yes.
so to speak. Like, there is a lot of... I don't want to sound overly negative about this, but I just feel like in Gundam at the moment, there are a lot of non-games where it just becomes a counting contest of like who saw more link pairs. I saw all my Ailstrikes and all my Kiras to go with them, and you saw all your ARC 78s, but you did not see your Kira, and you just like had like non-matching units.
Yep.
and pilots, right?
So I believe it's healthier for the game to kind of mitigate the non-variance, because at the moment I believe the strongest units and the strongest pilots don't necessarily need to be linked. They can just pair into other units and they work perfectly fine or even stronger in that way. I know earlier today we were talking about Ailstrike and Amuro, and
yeah, that's basically a link pair.
I've seen you throw Kira on a Wing Gundam so many times.
Yeah. I don't know. Are there enough sort of like non-link link pairs like that, though, so to speak, in the game? I feel like those are the main examples. Like,
Those are definitely the main
Ailstrike with a
examples.
pilot. Yeah.
We could see more going into set three, because set three has a lot more of that kind of stuff. Just because they're opening up
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those traits. But if we're currently talking about set one and set two, and I do believe the best of three idea is feedback from our current set one and set two meta, in which we kind of have a dichotomy between aggro and blockers and almost nothing in between.
Yeah, like, and I guess that's like the other idea of like mitigating variance, is that like in a best of one format, it's very hard to play a mid-range type of strategy. Like, what even is a viable mid-range deck, like, quote unquote, right now in the game? I think red white might be potentially the closest thing. Like, early blockers that are efficient going into like really good like mid-game boss units like Kishatri and Sananju. Maybe that's the closest thing to a mid-range deck.
Maybe some blue purple lists feel mid-rangey. I don't know
Oh,
if you
sure,
define
yeah.
clan maybe as a mid-range deck.
Yeah, maybe. I think Clan is just not good. Good enough to be defined in any in any category. But maybe I'm being a little bit too mean
No,
about that.
it is
Uh,
unfortunate that clan
yeah,
is missing a little bit of its pieces to
yeah. Which,
fully.
granted, like, now to be fair, I might eat my words in a month or two when when we get more stuff for it in set three, because like the new clan cards coming in set three do seem at least a bit promising. So we'll see. But yeah, like, as far as like mitigating variance goes, I think it can also apply to just like your draws. Like, for example, like, it kind of feels bad in a best of one format where you drew the wrong half of your deck. Like, maybe you kept a hand that was good for an aggro matchup, but oh, whoops, you're actually up against a control deck, or vice versa. And I guess that's like another reason why mid range doesn't tend to do well in this best of one format, is because sometimes you'll just draw the wrong half of your deck, which is not something you want to be doing like throughout 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds, when half of your matches like you mulliganed into the wrong hand, quote unquote.
It definitely happens where you kind of have a 5 card unplayable hand if you're playing one of these later game oriented decks, and then you mulligan and you still see a similar 5 cards like Epion Freedom, Strike, Gundam, and then mulligan, Gundam, Strike, another Freedom, or whatever.
They're just like mono level 5s.
Mono level 5s and 4s and no blockers, and then your opponent drops 2 gems on the board, and you just have to look at them.
You're just dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just mono pilots. That's also a hand that happens sometimes, which is pretty unfortunate. I think best of 3 would mitigate those feel bads kind of scenarios. I mean, not that they won't happen, but at least like your whole match may less often be determined by something as silly as that.
Mm-hmm.
Another point I had written down is that it's another opportunity to adjust how you're playing a certain matchup. Like maybe your opponent brought in like some sort of like interesting or off the wall dark horse deck, and like you might have made a few mistakes game 1 just because like you weren't sure what you were up against, but then games 2 and 3 is like, okay, now I know how to beat you, so you adjust. Maybe you like be more aggressive into their shields if you need to be, or play more for board, or just like change up like what sort of units you're prioritizing to like kill, things like that.
Oh, definitely. And I think as we see the game mature and we see more units for pilots, you can kind of gauge what units they chose to put in their deck along with their pilots, so you're more prepared for your own strategy. I'm sure Kira at this point has a billion links. If your opponent is picking Sword Strike with a Launcher Strike, or GDO3 Freedom over GDO1 Freedom, or something like that, you're kind of more prepared on how to deal with each of his choices.
Right. Which, I don't know if this is also a con in another way. It might be like a bit of double-edged sword, where if you like playing those sort of like off-the-wall Dark Horse style decks, then you do kind of lose that surprise factor going into games 2 and 3, so like those types of decks become a little bit worse, I guess.
Definitely.
So I guess there's 2 camps of people that you could see for that. I think more so it's a good thing for that kind of point, but I can definitely see where, you know, just like, you know, people want to enjoy the game in a lot of different facets, so I can understand where someone might feel a bit disenfranchised otherwise. And I guess going into some other arguments against having a best of 3 format, the biggest thing I hear is that your tournaments will be longer, right? This is going from a 30-minute round timer to a 60-minute round timer, and then from like 5 minutes of overtime to 10 minutes of overtime is literally double the time.
Yes, 70-minute rounds is gonna definitely fatigue your player base, especially in the larger tournament setting where you can easily hit 9-10 rounds a tournament. And these tournaments start at 10 a.m. If you're spending 70 minutes, that's over an hour each round. 9 rounds, that's 10 hours later, 10 plus hours later.
Like, I'll put this into perspective, right? So a couple weekends ago, we had the Orlando Gundam Regionals. Arvin went, he top 8'd. Congratulations again, Arvin.
Thank you.
While I was actually in Houston, Texas for the first Riftbound Regionals. So I'll let you go first, Arvin. What time did you start playing, and what time did you finish playing?
We started around 10:30. I can't remember the exact time, but we were done, I want to say by 5. Definitely by 5. I think we were in the middle of getting prizing at that point. It's just 35-minute rounds so fast, and the TO was trying to keep things moving because they don't want to be here forever, and I know everyone doesn't want to stay in the venue extra long just to collect prizing. So
yeah, let's say like roughly like around 5 o'clock is when you were pretty much done, right?
Yep.
Because I think that's when I saw it in our group chat. So my day also started around like 10 o'clock, maybe closer to 10:30. I know there were a bit of delays with actually getting the tournament started. There were some software
Was this
issues
Central
with
Time?
UVS. Central Time, yes, yes. So in my local time, which was Central Time, so I'm about an hour behind you at this point. So when your 5 o'clock rolled around and you put it in the group chat that you were finished, it was 4 o'clock in my time when I was over there. And again, Riftbound is a best-of-3 format with a very similar like time structure. I was barely done with round 4 at that point. So like I was playing playing for 6.5 hours, and I wasn't even done with half of the tournament. It was supposed to be like 9 rounds of Swiss, I believe. Like we were not even halfway done at that point.
That sounds like a
Now,
gauntlet.
yeah, okay. Now, granted, to be fair, is like, it's not completely on Riot and UVS. There were some delays. Of course, this was their first regional, so there's going to be some administrative delays. Plus, like, I know there were some issues with the software, which again, you can blame on them or whatnot. But that's just what happens, right? But like, it still comes back to the original point where like the rounds are just significantly longer than the typical like Bandai Best-of-1 rounds, and there's other administrative things that are added onto the clock too, because in a best-of-3 format for Riftbound and other games like Magic the Gathering, how many games out of the round you won also matters to your tiebreaker. So like whether you beat your opponent 2-1 or 2-0, like beating your opponent's 2-0 is a stronger tiebreaker than beating your opponent's 2-1. You didn't lose any games. That's the idea, right? And then just like taking that sort of data into account as well, there's just a lot of like extra small things administratively with like scorekeeping, as well as like overtime rules and determining draws and all that just do add back to the clock. And that is something that I guess we could potentially see with Gundam, at least as far as like the new that PDF that they put up on the Japanese website. Apparently draws are allowed now, if I remember correctly.
You can draw in the game if I believe if you and your opponent each won one game and we're not able to start game 3, it is a tie.
And then if you're already in game 3 and you went into overtime, and by the end of it, if there's no clear winner, then I think that's also a draw, if I read the PDF correctly. Again, this was translated from Japanese to English, so I don't know if there might be something lost in translation there, but that's what it seemed like. Like I wasn't seeing the typical like tiebreakers, like how many cards left in shield area, cards in deck, cards in hand, etc. I don't think I saw those.
There was a separate section for Top Cut. It might be different for Top Cut. I need to go back and read the rules. These are just our impressions for this point.
Yeah, so I can definitely understand that, where people might be a bit discouraged with having a best-of-3 format and just like going to regionals and just being stuck playing for 12 to 14 hours without like a lunch break or dinner break. I've done it before. Like, I mean, when I was younger, I played like Yu-Gi-Oh! Regionals and like big Magic events, so I've experienced it. But like, man, I've played One Piece for a couple of years now, and just like only One Piece, so going from a best-of-1 format, and then I played like Riftbound, just going back to that is like, oh man, that was like.
Did you guys get a lunch break?
It was a bit of a shock. Did we get a lunch break? I don't think we did.
We got one.
So you finished by 5 o'clock and you still had a lunch break in between. Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, like with the amount of time in between each rounds at that Riftbound event, you might as well have had a lunch break you might as well have had 4 lunch breaks at that point. But
so is overtime not timed in Riftbound?
No. And so like I know this is something that a lot of people give Yu-Gi-Oh! Flack for their overtime rules, but I understand why Konami has their policies this way, because Riftbound, very similar to Magic the Gathering, does not enforce a clock when you go into overtime. You just play your I believe it's 5 additional turns in time. And like, yeah, I mean, a judge staff might be coming around just to make sure that like you're not taking way too long, that you can actually end the game expeditiously. But no, there is no proper like clock that is enacted. Not like One Piece or Gundam where it's just like whatever happens first, you finish the extra turns or 5 minutes and then it's cut. No, there isn't like that. So yeah, if you could imagine, that does add a lot of extra time to your day.
So I guess these child rules, we'll see how much different it is than other games currently on the market that don't enforce time rules or enforce a hard time in time.
Yeah, like I said before, like Yu-Gi-Oh and Konami, they have a very stringent overtime rules where like once time is called, you cut the phase and determine tiebreaker factors from there. Where now they changed it more recently. I know there's a bit more contention to that, but I understand why. In like the opposite end of the spectrum is like what you see in Magic and Riftbound, where you'll be sitting around waiting on other people to finish their overtime procedures for like 10, 20, even 30 minutes in between a round, and it's so grueling, sometimes, especially going into that from a best-of-1 format. So, and I guess, like, I know some people have talked about slow play as well. Like, could a best-of-3 format encourage slow play? I don't know. Like, I mean, you and I have both seen slow play in other games, even in best-of-1 games like One Piece. There have been some unfortunate incidents with that. I think people will just try to push the rules to their extent in, like, whatever structure they're in. Like, that's just the unfortunate truth, especially when we're talking about big tournaments with cards that you can sell for like thousands of dollars.
Yep. Time rules can be abused, and they do get abused, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's easier to slow play in a best-of-3 format, from your perspective?
Well,
I don't know.
I think if you can win game one, and you probably don't need to slow play your opponent at all. Which is, I guess, the most important part of slow playing in a best-of-3.
Yeah, I guess, like, maybe just throwing an example out there, right? You're in a blue-white control mirror match in Gundam, like blue-white blockers. The matchup sometimes is just like watching paint dry because it's just like trying to see like who blinks first, right? Your game one could take like 30, maybe even 40 minutes off of the clock, and then someone like barely wins by the skin of their teeth going into like the 45th minute, and then like the last 15 minutes of the round, whoever won game one, there might be an argument that like you're probably how do I phrase this? Like, I guess incentivized to play at a brisk and or slow pace to,
I suppose,
see
so.
if you could cheese to win like that. And I'm not encouraging it. Like, do not, those of you that are watching this, do not take that as like me saying, oh, you should slow play to ensure your match win. That is not what I'm saying. But
no, obviously not. That's just the dynamics of a control mirror, right? And winning or losing game one might affect your sideboarding in that mirror, right? If you lose game one, you're more incentivized to side in a more aggressive package.
Yeah, probably. If sideboard is a component that is enabled, then yeah, I would probably agree that you should be playing cards in your board that can like try to finish the game more expediently, hopefully in your favor. But like, I think the general consensus is that people don't really want to go into time. You want to be able to finish your round expeditiously and like try to get the games to get to their natural end, so to speak. Actually have like a real winner, someone actually like hit somebody while they're at zero shields kind of deal, or decked out, I guess. I see the argument. Like, the only reason why I brought it up is because I know I've seen some people like kind of bring up that point here and there when talking about the subject, and I personally don't subscribe to this point. I think that people, like I said before, people are just going to try to stretch the rules however they can regardless of the time structure. Because like we've had it in One Piece before where someone has tried to slow play, unfortunately, and because like in One Piece they have tiebreaker rules such as like more life remaining. That's like a pretty common one, so they'll try to like push your opponent down to low life and then just like play really lame, really really defensively and really slowly to make sure that they burn out the time and they'll end the game with more life so they win.
Yep.
That kind of deal.
I definitely heard that happen if you're a defensive deck that is able to take some life on your opponent. Uh, just stall it 30 minutes and that's a win, even if it was a bad matchup.
Yeah, like maybe like dawn up your leader twice, hit him for like 8, hit him for 10, just like keep countering aggressively, and then just keep throwing down blockers. So you don't even bother bringing out like real characters. I've seen that happen before. Unfortunately, again, it's just I think that's just maybe that's more of a weakness in the actual like overtime rules rather than a symptom of best-of-3 in its own, or best-of-3 versus best-of-1 in its own discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know we brought this point up before, like prior to us recording, but matchup fatigue could also be a thing as far as like why people wouldn't want to play a best-of-3. I know there's some decks that are very divisive as far as like how fun it is to play against them. 1 Year War, Green White Wing. I know some people groan and moan about these decks online because they're just the most popular decks, I suppose.
No, I can definitely see if you're playing a 4-round locals and you were to play 4 1-year war decks. That's 8 games of 1-year war. That doesn't sound fun at all to me.
That is true. That is doubling the amount of games that you're playing against the deck that you hate playing against.
It's at least 8 games. It could be up to what, 12?
12, yeah. Which I don't know if you would subscribe to this idea, but we technically don't have to run a best-of-3 format for locals. I think.
I think so. I think a casual best of one is better for locals, especially on the weekdays. I know a lot of our locals we start at 7. A best of 3 starting at 7 sounds like a bad time.
Yeah, I mean, like again, I've done it for Magic. Most recently, I've done it for Riftbound, but sometimes like we've gone to like 11 o'clock or midnight to finish our 4 or 5 rounds event, and people just want to go home at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I drive 40 minutes to the locals. If I have to get out at 11 or 11:30, drive 40 minutes home and get to bed after midnight and wake up at 8 o'clock for work.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't seem...
Yeah, I mean, same. Yeah, same here. I live an hour.
You have a crazy drive.
Yeah. I definitely would not be against the idea of like just locals have, or like local game stores having the like their own freedom to choose what structure they want to play if they still want to like maintain best of ones just to run their event more expeditiously. And then maybe for like higher tier events like a new type challenge, right, to do that as a best of 3 with sideboard, because those are like slightly more competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they ever, I don't know, if they ever implement other types of higher tier events like store regionals like we've seen for Digimon and Gundam, that could also be a thing.
I do want to comment real quick on that bit of best of 1 for locals, is that we have a couple of Digimon locals here that are best of 3, and we have one that is best of 1. And it's the best of 1 that is the least popular among the community locally here.
Really?
Yeah. They dislike that the game is completely different in one store because of the dynamics of a best of 3.
Okay. Like, so I guess, like, is our local community, because, I know nothing about our local Digimon community, are these the kind of guys to like travel to regionals and stuff? Is that why?
A couple of them do travel to regionals, and it is because you build your deck around best of 3, or kind of around there's a certain math, right, to deck building where you're playing to a best of 1 and best of 3. You can take a little bit of liberty when you're playing a best of 3 with
for sure.
with your ratio choices. Yeah. And I think just getting sacked in a best of 1 and leaving X2 after, an hour at locals seems like a waste of time.
That's fair. That's fair. I can definitely see that as well. That's interesting, man. Because I would also expect that, like, I guess some folks might prefer best of three at their locals to best mirror the more competitive events, just so that's good practice, I suppose.
I would think so. We're kind of winding down the competitive season at this point. Everyone who um, is grinding for their invites has them at this point. So
Yeah,
opinions might change depending on the time of year.
that makes sense. Is there anything else to add, like to best of three specifically? Is there any arguments for and against it that I would add? Again, I'm probably biased. I am biased. I'm always biased, but I do like best of three. I am a proponent of a best of three structure, even with or without sideboard. I think best of three would be a a more prudent direction to go with Gundam
I think
based on just the way the game is played.
I think there's a certain satisfaction from winning a tournament that was best of three because you knew you did you played the best you could throughout every set rather than happening to like luck sack an opponent here and there or your
Yeah, like
opponent,
you didn't
you
beat
know,
someone by a fluke or a lucky shot.
exactly.
Like, yeah, yeah, I can agree with that. Which again, I don't know. Maybe for a weaker player, it might be the opposite, where they want the opportunity to win, so they want to maximize those lucky shots, so to speak. But no, I think you're right. Most folks would prefer, like, I guess, the satisfaction of winning a tournament with, or like topping a tournament because they played better, I suppose, or they brought a better deck, or they brought the best deck for that event, or their best card choices, etc., etc. I think that is a pretty core reason why most people would want best of three, in addition to just like the mitigation of variance, and so to speak. Let's talk about sideboards now specifically, because like I said before, and like you and I have actually talked to people that specifically did not like the idea of sideboarding. Like they wanted the best of three, but they did not want sideboards. I don't know if this is like coming from like other games like Pokemon and Digimon to like Digimon pilled, so to speak, or if like I don't know, like the specific friends that I've talked to, I'm not really sure what their background is as far as why they were against having a sideboard. I like it but that's just because I'm used to it, I guess, coming from like a bunch of other card games. I know you. I think Riftbound was literally your first
Hmm.
sideboard card game, right?
The Riftbound was, and I will admit I suck at Riftbound. I have crazy decision paralysis when it comes to playing Riftbound. I play Victor, if for context. I know it's not the best deck in the room, but I think it's solid. It has some good matchups.
It's gonna
Um,
be pretty good soon. I will say that.
y- Zero unit Victors looks crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I have crazy decision paralysis. It might be because set one is 300 cards, and I am not entirely I have not entirely memorized the card set for Riftbound as I
Hmm.
focus on Gundam mainly. But 300 cards, when you compare to a Bandai game, that's almost two sets of a game, and that's just set one for Riot. Um, I have not memorized all the choices, so sideboarding in that game is even worse for me because not only do I not know what's happening on my opponent's turn or what they could potentially do on when it's their focus, which is their action step for Gundam players.
Yeah.
Uh, I guess it's close enough. Um, I don't even know what they could side in. I don't even know what I should be siding in based on their sides. So there is a knowledge check required when playing a sideboard game, an additional knowledge check, I suppose, rather than just the straight meta deck research that you might do, like go to Eggman events and see what's winning in your current format.
Hmm.
There, people might be teching more for the meta, and the meta probably could evolve faster. Sideboards could evolve faster depending on how things are changing up, and also depending on how many premier events you see results for.
Like, I guess one of the main things like one of the main reasons why I like a sideboard for a game like Gundam is that it it kind of comes back to the whole variance mitigation, where you walk up against one of your bad matchups, so to speak. Because like most of the times in a healthy metagame, like decks will have good matchups and bad matchups. It's just like kind of the way of life with most things, unless we're like literally in the tier zero format where you should only be playing the one deck, which that's a whole nother can of worms. Um, but like the idea is that with a sideboard, you go up against your bad matchup, and instead of just like sitting down and just getting beaten up for two or maybe 3 games, you have more of a fighting chance in games 2 and 3. Um, and in that case, I think there's like more niche cards that could see play, like cards that we looked at in the spoiler season. We're like, man, this would be really cool against this matchup, but I can't put it in my deck because it's really bad against these other matchups. I think the best example I've thought of is like Beneath the Mask.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, rest 2, level 2 or lower units at action speed. Really good in blue against the small low to the ground aggro decks like One Year War or Blue Red, but really awful against the white decks like Green White and Blue White. There are a few other cards too, like I guess Close Combat is an example. People still play Close Combat already, but it's definitely significantly better versus aggro decks and significantly worse versus the control decks. So being able to kind of like board out these bricks in the bad matchup, or keeping these great cards in a certain matchup, so like your deck doesn't feel like 25% bad. If that makes sense.
An interesting dynamic you could see is like a white deck playing Zords against a red deck playing Close Combats. Works for game 1, but obviously the white player is going to side out the Zords because Close Combat exists, and the red player is going to side out the Close Combats because they're playing against a control deck, so they want to do more damage, or they might know the Zords are coming out, or something similar to that. Like there's some
like
more
battle
interesting
vases or something like that.
dynamics that can happen in sideboarding, which an additional layer to the game always interests me.
Yeah, which again, there might be even more cards that like never saw play before, but will suddenly see play because of sideboards. Like, there's another card. It's like something stratagem. It's Nicola Marfi as a pilot, but as a command side, it's like you pay 1 to deal 2 to a unit with 2 or less power. It's from set 1.
Oh, Stealth Stratagem, yes. A main
Stealth
action.
Stratagem, yes.
It's a level 2 1 cost that says choose one enemy with 2 or less AP, deal 2 damage to it.
Yeah, like a cheaper Close Combat against the aggro decks, Like, I feel like maybe something like that could even see play. I feel like if you wanted. Like say you're playing your red-white deck, you play that in addition to your Close Combats and or Battle Vases. That'd be pretty sick.
I think that just kills that kind of strategy in general. There's a lot of aggro hate in the game. It's just hard to run it in main because other decks exist.
Yeah, and like, I think this could actually mitigate one of the core issues with the game, is that in the fact that like aggro feels a little bit too strong. Now, granted, it's not like aggro is like tier 0, so to speak, but just the idea of playing this 1 cost 2/2 and representing like an 1/8 of your life, or no, a 1/7 of your life total, because it only takes 1 damage to break a shield, So going wide with a bunch of weenies is really, really strong fundamentally in this game, because there's no like real sweepers, like there's nothing like a Wrath of God or a Raigeki, like something that just like blows up the whole board, aside from Wing 0, but that doesn't come until level 8, so like really, really late, right? So it doesn't feel good to be the recipient of getting beaten down by a bunch of weenies. Like, I've lost plenty of games to that, where my opponent just goes like turn 2 1 drops, turn 3 Sharzaku, swing, I didn't draw a blocker, turn 4 they draw like two more bodies to play out, swing, and I'm like, oh well, I guess I'm just dead.
Well, yeah, definitely. And it's decks like that prevents a wider meta from existing, I think. If you have the ability to side out into hate for those decks, you could actually play more fun decks, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of cool decks. Like, I know I made fun of it just earlier, but Clan could maybe be a deck where, like, if you tune it right, you could at least have the better fighting chance against either the slower decks or the fast decks. It's just that you couldn't, because like you had such a high deck building requirement for having to play so many Clan units, you couldn't quite account for both types of matchups, so to speak. But maybe you could with a sideboard, since you have like 10 extra cards to work with to swap in and out. Um, and I think that's just the biggest thing is just like you get to have more cards in your deck box to play with, which is fun. Like effectively having 60 cards to consider for your deck list to put in your deck box instead of having to like painfully shave things down to 50 cards and just having to make a concession of like, oh, okay, I'm probably going to be weaker against this matchup, but I really don't want to lose to aggro or vice versa. I might make some concessions against aggro. I'll probably get beaten up, but I just really want to beat up wing decks. But now, like, you have a little bit more versatility with having the sideboard, so to speak.
And it feels like they're designing the game based around that, just based on the few reveals we've seen in set three. Speaking of wing, they have two more 8-cost units.
Like, oh yeah, like that 8-cost Shenlong, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really awesome against a control deck. I would love to slam it down against a blue-white control deck, but I never want to see that card in my hand against a weenie 1-year war aggro deck.
It seems like a premier,
Yeah.
like a boss monster sideboard card that feels like you win the game when you play it in the right deck, into the right deck.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so I guess those are the main pros, I would say, to having a sideboard. Just a lot more creativity and flexibility. That's a lot more skill expression, too, I think, when it comes to deck building specifically. Until the format gets solved, and like I guess it's a whole another discussion that comes to the side of it, but what are some cons to sideboarding? Like, what are some arguments that folks have presented where they prefer not to have a sideboard?
Oh, for me, I I think I teased it earlier when I mentioned my Riftbound experience, but
Yeah.
I have decision paralysis and a little bit of fatigue when going into sideboarding for my for game two and three. I sometimes just don't know. It's a lot. It's an extra layer of research to do for the game, and if you're casual like I am for Earthbound, it's a little bit stressing, to say the least.
And like, okay, before people go in the comments and say, "Oh, skill diff," which
It is.
yes, it is a skill diff. Like, it by definition, it is a skill diff, so to speak. But like, again, this is a game that like people want to enjoy in different facets. If people want to enjoy Gundam as a game casually, is like, do we want to add that extra layer of like research and complexity? Because honestly, that's kind of what Yu-Gi-Oh feels like nowadays, where because the cards are so complicated, plus the additional sideboard plans and all that, it's like it's almost like you have to go through a couple of college courses to figure out how to play your deck and how it interacts with the meta. Whereas, you know, in most Bandai games, I think Bandai has done a pretty good job of like sticking to the sort of mission where their games are pretty easy to pick up, sit down, play casually with your friends, and or just like go to like a local game store and play an event just with like the 50 cards in your deck box plus resources, I guess. Like with a sideboard and just like adding that extra layer of complexity, so to speak, does that detract from that main mission that Bandai games have had?
Maybe
I don't know.
not because of how archetypal Bandai games are compared to Riftbound right now. I don't think Riftbound has like straight archetypes. You have cards that are good at index, but you have cards that are just good in colors in general, right?
I mean, there's cards that are just generically good, like Thousand Tail Watcher is a great example for blue, right? Most blue decks run it. Like Riftbound, I think it's more adjacent to Magic, where there are certain cards that are just kind of staples to their colors. I don't know if Gundam is quite like that. I guess in white, there's a few cards, right? Elfrith and Rictias are probably examples of this.
The Kira package.
Kira, yeah, and Ailstrikes potentially. Blue, Amuro would be an example of this. The Arc 78. I'm trying to think if there's ever been a blue deck that hasn't run the Amuro package. Or Gun Tech and Angsha. I don't think so. Like,
You played one. You won a new type challenge with it.
that unicorn pile. Yeah, the unicorn brew. Yeah. But that's another thing where like if I had a sideboard, I could probably run that deck again.
Oh.
I haven't ran it again because I think people kind of figured out the gimmick and people just like got faster, more like decks just got faster, more aggressive, so I just really couldn't play it. But maybe with a sideboard now, I could actually like adjust it to certain matches. So again, that's actually another pro to playing with a sideboard, is that you can play these more like quote unquote fragile strategies, these more off the wall strategies, and like actually make them work potentially. But yeah, I guess just like adding that extra layer of complexity, so to speak, if that's a turn off to players, I feel like mostly it's not quite that point yet. I don't think for Gundam. I think the cards are simple enough. It's not like Yu-Gi-Oh where things are like overly complicated. Like a card doesn't do like 20 things, right?
You're right. Cards are pretty much one-use tools. Like you know why you're putting it in the deck, and so there's not a lot of time deciding on the side in a match, but it could be a factor, right? Time.
Yeah, time is definitely a factor as well. Where there's like the physical mechanics of deciding what cards to bring in and out, and actually like physically like grabbing the cards out of your deck, swapping them out. That is time added to the clock. While it might not feel like very much, it is something that does take time. Like personally, I feel that is just the responsibility of the player to like kind of just know your deck, know the matchup. Like particularly if you're in regionals, I'll say this. You're preparing for a competitive event. That's part of your preparation, is to like know your matchups, know your sideboard plan, like knowing what to take in and out for a certain matchup. Just like having that prepared beforehand. I think that's I think that's like a responsibility you as a player should already bring to the table for more competitive events. Now, again, at the local game store level, it's different. Obviously everyone's learning, so there's more leniency there.
I just feel bad taking so much time.
But again, like at the local game store level, that I feel like that's fine, because again, like where else are you going to learn, right?
Too.
Outside of like playtesting with your friends. But,
to be fair, my Riftbound opponents have been very forgiving on the amount of time I take making decisions.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, in Riftbound too, it's a very new game. Everyone's new at this. Everyone's trying to figure out what they're doing. So I think there's definitely more leniency there. And I would hope for the same in Gundam as well. Like if we do happen to implement this for the rest of the world. I guess one other argument I've seen running around is that certain decks might become too well-rounded, so to speak. So an example that I've seen is Green White Wing. It's already a very strong deck, but if you could do this sort of like transformative sideboard where you slot out all your Shenlongs and Wu Feis and put in a bunch of Kiers and Sword Strikes to really beat up the aggro decks, or vice versa, you want to like really beat up the slow control decks. You bring in all your Shenlongs and Wu Feis, you take out like the weaker cards like your Zowarts and your Sword Strikes, right? You just like turn this deck into like a really complete 50 cards against whatever archetype that you want to beat.
I think that's a pro for deck building and picking the proper pilots for your main deck units and your sideboard units. You mentioned two pilots that have very good units, and I think that's something to look forward to. Like in the future of the game, is that units will change, but pilots might not change as much. So the Sword Strikes pairing with my Kira might change into Freedoms, or maybe eventually Strike Freedoms or whatever.
Yeah, Strike Freedom, Mighty Strike Freedom, whenever we get it one day. I mean, surely we will. Or like the Wu Fei, right? Eventually we'll get the Eltron next set.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and then maybe other versions of Shenlong, or just like, I don't know what else Wu Fei piloted in the anime. I'm sure he piloted some other things too. Everyone did.
Operation Meteor has a generic link, right? The heavy arms.
Oh yes, that too. Yeah. So, I guess like it's both a pro and a con. Like I really do see it more as a positive, like you said. Just because I think sideboarding is a two-way street. Like, sure, the Green White Wing deck might feel much stronger because it gets to transform into the ideal role against almost every matchup, but like the guy on the other side of the table has their own sideboard, so surely they can do something to, to like better beat up the wing decks, right? I'm not sure what that would look like quite yet. Obviously, there's a lot of testing to do with that, but is that a problem with sideboards as a concept, or is that just a problem with the card pool? I think that's actually more of a problem with the
I
card pool.
think the sideboards might expose problems with the card pool, and I think that's a positive because it
Hmm.
lets Bandai take action faster if they need to regarding ban lists.
Yeah, I hope they go about it in a smart way as well, like not trying to print like crazy silver bullets, so to speak. I know that's another concern some folks have had. I think the sentiment often comes from folks that might have played Yu-Gi-Oh, where Yu-Gi-Oh sideboards are full of like these silver bullet haymakers that, like, if you go second, you board in crazy cards like Evenly Matched, Dark Ruler No More, Lightning Storm, like things that just like completely blow your opponent out of the water when you're going second. And then going first, you side in like a bunch of like really strong trap cards like Solemn Judgment, or Floodgate traps like Anti-Spell Fragrance, things like that. So hopefully they are smart about what they print as far as like good sideboard tech. Which like so far I haven't really seen anything, even in the spoilers for set 3, that would lead me to think that there's any sort of crazy silver bullet as of yet. Like Beneath the Mask might be like the closest thing in my eyes, like being something that's like specifically really strong against aggro decks, but maybe it's appropriate just based on how strong aggro is anyway.
Yeah, and it's an action, so it's not like it's a static that stays on the board telling your opponent that they can't play the game. You kind of had to give a card up for it.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's not like you play the one card and you instantly win the match. It's not anywhere close to that kind of level. So I could see it being an issue maybe down the line, depending on what kind of cards Bandai designs. But I think for now, it's one of those things where like we'll address them when we get there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's pretty much most of the points of contention that people have had. Again, like I think the pros outweigh the cons for sideboards as well. It's just the potential for added creativity to deck building, having to play other cards, like just getting the opportunity to play with more cards. I think is always a positive for a TCG, right?
That's what I'm excited for.
And when it comes to like issues with time as well, like I think that's just something that comes with like growing pains of like just adjusting policy. Like again, we didn't really get into the nitty gritty about what's on like the overtime rules from the Japanese side of things, like what they put out. Because like personally, I think these are things that are very subject to change, right? Again, like we said in the beginning, this seems like kind of a testing period, so to speak. So I wouldn't be overly fixated on that stuff right at this moment. If something's wrong, we can address it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what Bandai is trying to do right now, especially for things like overtime and like the concerns over slow play. As a bit of a side tangent, I've always told people before, like if you feel like your opponent is slow playing, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just call a judge. Like you can start by like being cordial, being like, hey, we only have like X minutes left in the round. Can we please like try to finish the game more expeditiously? Try to be very respectful of that. But if your opponent is like consistently slow playing, I would say call a judge. Like, don't worry about being overly confrontational, I suppose. Don't worry about being that guy trying to angle shoot them. I really don't see it like that. I think it's just getting a judge
No,
present
no,
just to make sure things are done correctly, right?
it's exactly as you said. The pace of play is a two-way street, and it's not. I mean, it might not even be a two-way street, but like, even your opponent have to play fast, but you also have to respect the other players in the tournament. If you aren't finishing fast, before time, then you're delaying the rest of the tournament. Then it's just that much more important to call a judge.
Yeah, especially if someone's trying to do it maliciously too. It's definitely important to call a judge to at least get something on the record, because if there is like a record and there's like a pattern being reported of this individual slow playing and like not finishing games like in a reasonable amount of time, that can catch up to them. And like if there is a pattern, maybe there's an investigation, they can be found to be doing it maliciously, making sure that those type of players are not, welcome to play anymore. Or at least to change those type of behaviors. At least we can disincentivize that, right? I think that's the main thing. But otherwise, yeah, big ups to Bandai for trying this at the very least. I really do hope that this is something that is implemented. Like, will there be growing pains? Sure. I fully expect there to be, but I think this is a net positive and something I'm definitely willing to try out. I actually have some more video ideas because of this announcement. Like, now I want to make some videos of like doing some best-of-3 content, maybe like showing off like, okay, if we did have a sideboard, how would we approach this? What sort of like, what sort of tech can we bring in and out for certain matchups? Or if we have like, it's a 10-card sideboard, so we can even do like transformative strategies, like taking out like a whole package. Imagine taking out your Ailstrikes and Kiras and putting in like Soletas and Ariels, right? Or vice versa. I think there's a lot of things to explore there, so I'm really excited for that.
I definitely have ideas for current meta. We'll see when GDO3 fully drops how that card pool looks in this format, but already we have so many cool cards to mess with and first two sets.
Honestly, like, I even think this could fix some of the issues we've had for GDO2. Like, so originally when we first recorded this podcast, it was originally like a little opinion piece bashing GDO2. Maybe not to that extent, so to speak.
You're critiquing the issues that GDO2 presented as a weaker set compared to set 1 and set 3.
Yeah, it definitely was. Like, objectively speaking, if you look at tournament results and all that, like, GDO2 was definitely much less impactful than GDO1, which, I mean, obviously GDO1 is the first set, but even compared to, like, what we're seeing now in GD03, like, the cards just seemed significantly weaker on average. But I will say, with the addition of Sideboard, maybe now we have to take a second look at that set. There might be some diamonds in the rough, like Beneath the Mask, that is a GDO2 card. And there might be some other things that we just, like, never looked at and never considered because we just didn't have this other axis to think about. So I'm definitely excited for that. GD03 is also shaping up to look pretty good, as we just said earlier. Some of the spoilers I've actually been pretty impressed with. The Eltron Gundam was really cool. The Barbados Lupus, I think, is a really cool boss monster as well.
The NT1 links with Amuro.
Yes, yeah.
I
don't know how I feel about Amuro having another link pair, but it is cool.
We were eventually going to get it, but this one was unexpected.
But yeah, like, it's definitely starting to, I guess, address some of the issues with GDO2, where I felt the main issue with GD02 was that it introduced so many new archetypes, but not really enough cards for most of these decks, like Age, the new UNE, Gundam X. Like, a lot of these factions just like only had like sprinkles of cards that you really couldn't build like a full cohesive deck with. But now we're starting to get more and more cards for each of these factions. Like, they didn't just forget about them, which I really appreciate for GT03. So there's a lot to look at, and I'm very excited for it.
Same.
But I think that is pretty much it, guys. If you stuck with us to the end, thank you so much for listening and or watching. It's been a while since, like I said in the beginning, since we did a podcast episode like this. If you like this kind of content, definitely do subscribe. I know a lot of you more recently have subscribed for Gundam, so definitely let me know in the comments below. And let me know your opinions, too, about the Best-of-3 and Sideboard ideas. Are we on track or are we off? Like, what do you guys think? Are you excited for this change? Do you want this to be implemented for the rest of the formats? I do. That's just the flag I'm going to plant there. I think, Arvin, you do as well, right?
Yeah, and I'd also be interested in hearing what the viewers think about the current Best-of-3 rules and what changes they would make regarding the current
absolutely.
rules.
Yeah, and I guess we'll definitely have to see in Japan. I think it's literally the same weekend as we're having our Vegas Card Fest, the Japan finals. So, I guess we'll definitely see how things shape out for them. If the players over there liked it or not. Well, hopefully it works well. I'm very optimistic about it. So we'll definitely have to see. But as always, thank you all so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and comment down below. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.